Good morning. Hello, welcome to another video. There was a video before this one and there will be another one after it. Sorry, I'm kind of high in the frame for this one, but I'm at a park and I don't have a tripod or anything, so I'm just using like sticks to hold up my phone. But here we go. Today's video, I want to talk about some emotional breakthroughs I've made recently in regards to healing from my trauma and just sort of like discovering myself and how to cope and how to live in the world. So I had a lot of trauma in my childhood. A lot of very abnormal things happened to me that had significant impacts on my nervous system, on my mental health, moving forward into adulthood and into life, on my relationships with my family, my relationship with myself. And I don't want to go into too much detail about what exactly happened, but essentially there were 4 people who were supposed to be responsible for taking care of me, and none of them were very good parents. None of them were very responsible or really fulfilled their responsibility to take care of me. They all struggled for various reasons. So for a very long time, and I've talked about this in other videos, but for a very long time I thought I have bipolar disorder because that's what I was diagnosed with. But turns out I have autism, probably ADHD, and definitely PTSD. So once I sort of like figured that out, things started to change a little bit. So I've been, exploring my mind and the way it works and, why I engaged in certain very destructive, harmful behaviors with the people around me and with my life. And I wanted to know just like why, right? Like what's going on with me? In what way am I broken so that I can fix it? Because my goal has always just been to get better. So what I discovered is I tried a lot of things. First of all, I tried, therapy, in-person and group therapy for many years. I was hospitalized many times. I tried multiple different medications, all kinds of things. DBT, CBT, the whole gamut. I'm very familiar with that environment. And I do use a lot of those things that I learned during that time, even today. A lot of CBT techniques for reframing your cognitive processes are genuinely helpful. They didn't seem helpful to me at the time because they weren't working. But at some point they did start to work. And I started to notice that having more positive thoughts came naturally and effortlessly to me. And at that point I was like, okay, maybe I'm making some kind of progress. Maybe that is a tiny bird. That bird's like this big, and it's making that loud of a noise. Hey, I'm working here. Do you mind? Thank you. What was I saying? So basically, I tried all these things, a lot of CBT that I still use, and what I discovered that worked like very, very quickly for me was Jungian shadow work. Now, there's a lot of criticisms of Jung, but I never really read his texts. I was mainly absorbing the concepts through other people's explanations on the internet, which is maybe not the best way to go about things, but it worked for me because I was able to latch on to the parts of Jung's psychology and his philosophy about the mind that were useful to me and just leave behind everything else that didn't make any sense to me. So instead of reading like the Red Book and being convinced by whatever he has to say in there fully, I would, essentially watch like a few videos about shadow work and what the process is and what it looks like when a therapist engages in it with a patient. So, it was mainly focused on like the process and the main foundational concepts. And the main concept that was useful to me, which is that there's this sort of forefront, this sort of outward facing part of the mind that you as an individual can see, and that you also present parts of it to other people out in the world. You use it to interact with the world, you use it to present your best self. It involves your ego, your personality, your behaviors, your sense of fashion, everything that you present to the outside world. The calm and collected and put together and successful, happy person that you probably want people to think that you are. But then there's this also repressed part of the mind called the shadow, which contains all of the things that you don't want to admit that you are. Things like anger and depression, right? Insecurities, things like that. And the thing is, like, most of the things in the shadow we are not consciously aware of. They have to be unconsciously repressed, because it's safer, right? Like, if you were always thinking about all of your insecurities and you were always experiencing anger and rage all the time, then you probably wouldn't have a very good life. You wouldn't be very happy. You wouldn't be able to move through the world. And so it is safer for us to have, sort of a locker in the back of our minds where we put all the stuff that we don't want to show the world. That's the shadow. And everybody has this. Everybody's got this. For most people, it's perfectly functional. For some people, their shadow contains aspects of themselves that they need to explore and investigate. Otherwise, they will never heal from their pain. Because part of the function of suppressing certain aspects of the self, certain emotions and memories and things like that, is for safety. The mind doesn't do it for no reason. Everything that the mind does for us is in our own interest. So, for example, when it comes to like childhood trauma, I lived most of my life so far not remembering my childhood. I had maybe 5 total memories from before the age of 12. And that's not normal. That's not normal. If you think it's normal, you should probably really pay attention to this video. It is not normal, and I knew it. I was like, I don't remember my childhood like other people do, and I knew that it was probably because my childhood was really difficult. And having those memories like available to me at any moment could be too painful for me, right? Like, I had experiences as a child that were so painful and disturbing that my little child brain couldn't handle it, and so it repressed them, and I don't remember them. And that was a good thing for a very long time, because I did not have the coping skills to manage those memories. So here's what I did to explore my shadow. The first step for me was opening up a dialogue with my subconscious mind. I had always had sort of, what's it called, alexithymia, the inability to identify emotions and sensations in the body. The same kind of thing that makes you like forget to eat, or makes you not realize that you have to use the bathroom until it's almost too late, that kind of thing. I'm not talking about like intense focus or something. I'm talking about like you're just going through your day and you don't know what you're feeling. Somebody asks, how are you? And you're like, I'm here. That's how I was going through life for the most part, unless I was experiencing very, very intense emotions. The thing is, like, emotional circuitry in the brain is always on. It's one of those areas of the brain that is always active. So you should always be feeling something. Always, 24/7, all the time. You should have an emotion present, even if that emotion is just like contentment, right? So being disassociated from my emotions, I had to open that up. I had to break that dam open the door to the conversation, and really try to listen to what my body was telling me. And I did this over the course of several years, but actively near the end. One thing I did that helped I don't really recommend this because this is one of those things that can go wrong if you don't do it properly. But one thing that I did that helped me was fasting. I spent some time, this was before COVID days, it was years ago. I spent some time, basically, I had always been like a binge eater. Like, I was fat as a kid and I ate a lot, ate for comfort, ate for boredom, ate for depression. And I basically tried fasting. I was like, you know what, I did a lot of research about it. I read up on Angus Barberi and all these methods and the types of vitamins you need and the electrolytes and the level of hydration and, the proper ways to do it. And I started with a 1 day, and as soon as I realized I could go 1 day without eating and not die and not be in immense pain or anything, I went 2 days, and then I went 3 days, and then after a while, I was doing 5-day fasts every week and only eating on the weekends for about 6 weeks, 6 to 8, I don't remember exactly. And then I attempted a 30-day fast, but I only went 8 days. But that was all I needed. I learned a lot from that experience. There's something about being able to, being hungry and still not eating that takes so much like discipline and not really willpower, but like coping mechanisms, right? Like I had to learn how to distract myself and cope with very, very strong desires through that experience. And also what it did is it brought me more in tune with my body, the sensations of my body. Because, it's not just hunger that shows up. Hunger is a sensation that can take many different forms. You could be hungry because you're bored. You could be hungry because you're sad. You could be hungry because your body needs certain nutrients. You could be hungry in a different way because your body needs different nutrients. There's a lot of different sensations associated with, what food is doing in our bodies. And so going without food for a long enough time, I was able to pay attention and notice, what my metabolism feels like when I've just eaten, what my metabolism feels like when I've just eaten one thing versus another thing, what it feels like when I haven't eaten, right? What certain cravings for certain nutrients feel like. Just the ability, this is what they call intuitive eating, by the way. This is the skill I was developing, was intuitive eating. The ability to listen to your own body's signals and interpret them to know exactly what you need. The thing is, like, our bodies and our minds, they communicate with us all the time, and they love us. They want the best for us. They are us, and they want to survive. So they're doing everything they can to give us a pleasant experience that we can survive and thrive in. And so the body will tell you exactly what nutrients it needs if you know how to listen to it. And this is a skill that I developed through fasting. You could also do it through meditation, various forms of meditation. One other thing I did is that I sat down just in a quiet place, closed my eyes, and I thought with words in my mind certain questions. For example, am I hungry? And then I would just listen for some kind of sensation or a concept or a thought or an urge or a feeling in my body somewhere that felt like a response to that question. And I would continue the conversation. Okay, am I hungry? I get a little feeling in my stomach. Okay, that feels kind of like hunger. What are we hungry for? And I would use we often because I wanted it to feel like a collaboration between myself and parts of myself that I'd never really spoken to before. So what are we hungry for? And I picture like pickles or something. I'm like, okay, maybe we need electrolytes, so maybe get a Gatorade or something like that. It doesn't have to be exactly the craving, but when you can interpret these cravings and you know what your body's actually asking for, it's easy to find something to satisfy those feelings. And so I started doing this with emotions too. And now I have a conversation going. I have a dialogue with my subconscious. And I can at any point, at any time in the day, any day, sit down and ask myself questions and get answers. And now if this comes naturally to you, you might just think, this is just thinking. This is just what thinking is like. And you're kind of right. It is just thinking about things. But for somebody that has trauma, that has repressed certain thoughts, feelings, sensations, and emotions and memories for their entire life, almost 30 years of repressing these things, right? Eventually they're going to stop talking, right? If you ignore somebody for long enough, they're going to stop talking to you. But the moment that I opened up the dialogue and my subconscious mind recognized that I was listening to it, it started giving me things. It started giving me memories from my childhood, for example. And when this started happening, this is when I really knew I was doing something right, because this is what they say happens when you start to heal from trauma, is that these memories begin to be unlocked. Now, there is some discourse around childhood memory unlocking in trauma work. People, there is some evidence that certain therapists could accidentally introduce a bias when working with clients that causes them to have like false memories implanted. And I totally believe that that's possible, but also I didn't work with a therapist. I worked fully on my own with this. The only therapist like resources or like professional resources I was in contact with was things like on YouTube, certain YouTubers, people that make videos about Jungian psychology or about trauma work and healing. Generally people that have been therapists professionally or psychiatrists professionally and then sort of quit so that they could work on YouTube to do more good outside of the industry. Those types of people. And I wasn't working with them. I was using their guidance to work with myself. So I don't believe that I had any false memories implanted. I believe that these memories are fully real, that they really happened, and I'm grateful that they were finally revealed to me, because it is truly a wonderful feeling going your whole life not knowing what your childhood was like, and then all of a sudden you're just getting these memories popping up left and right. And every time I got one of these memories unlocked, I would sit there and think, oh yes, this is great. I feel safe enough to hold on to this memory now because I feel better about myself. I know what to say and what to think about these memories so that I don't judge myself negatively. Like for example, if I unlock some childhood memory about being alone a lot as a kid, right? Like, maybe trying to play with other kids and realizing that I don't quite fit in. Before, I would have judged myself harshly for that and thought, oh, I should have socialized more as a kid, and then I would know how to socialize now. Now that I understand myself a lot better, I have more compassion looking back at that memory than I would have before. And this is what it means for it to be safe for these memories to be revealed. As soon as you can have self-compassion and a conversation with your subconscious, it will give you these things and be like, what do you think about this? And if you approach it with gratitude and compassion and respect, it's a very, very pleasant experience. It really feels like healing. And a lot of this also is reparenting. Reparenting is something that I had to do, which I also learned of the concept and the processes through, these various therapists on YouTube. Because they really don't teach you about reparenting in professional therapy. Honestly, professional therapy is like the kindergarten version of it, and if you want to graduate to middle school versions of therapy, you pretty much have to either have money or really good insurance, or you have to just do it on your own, which is what I had to do. I spent 12 years in, longer than that actually, but I spent a lot of years doing therapy. And at some point I realized that we're just going over the same topics over and over and over again. It's like I never graduated elementary school. So I had to sort of move on and do my own thing. They don't teach you reparenting in the basic levels of therapy. So I had to learn about it from the internet, and I had to practice it on my own and just, do my best. And reparenting involves basically taking the aspects of yourself, especially the things in your shadow, that were ingrained in childhood. Almost childlike coping mechanisms, right? Like for example, I had to learn to manipulate people because I had to manipulate my parents and my family to get my needs met. as a child. And I never grew out of it until a certain age. I thought this is just a natural, this is, every time I would think maybe this is a wrong thing to do, that child, that traumatized child would come up in my brain and be like, no, 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 this is right. This is good for you. This is protecting you. This is safe. This is the safest thing to do. You need to keep yourself safe. And to do that, you need to manipulate these people. You need to do all these destructive behaviors and things that maybe worked when I was a child, but now just don't. And so reparenting involves, investigating those coping mechanisms and those behaviors, finding the reasons for them, and thanking them. Being like, thank you for keeping me safe as a child. I don't need you anymore. And then let it go. And it's very difficult because that child is going to fight. It's a child, right? It doesn't really know. It's all emotion. It doesn't know any better. And so it's going to say, no, 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 you're not safe without me. You're not safe. We need to do this. We need to be this way, or it's just not safe. We're going to get hurt. We're going to die. All this anxiety comes up. And this is the emotion that would come up every time I would get a childhood memory unlocked. I'd unlock a memory. I would be very excited about it at first. And then maybe 3 to 5 days later, I would start to get this uprising of emotion that was associated maybe with the memory, maybe not really even associated with the memory, but I would sit there and think, okay, nothing is happening, nothing is going on special today, so why am I so anxious, right? Why am I so depressed? Why am I grieving right now? Like, what's going on? And again, just open the dialogue, have a conversation with the subconscious, ask it, why is it doing this? What's the purpose of this? And then discuss with myself, is this useful? Is this useful right now? Is this useful generally? And if the answer is no, then we let it go. With compassion, with gratitude. And it's very difficult, but that's what reparenting is, essentially. It's taking the inner child and saying, thank you for doing what you needed to do. You were so strong, you were so smart, you did everything right, but I don't need this anymore. We're an adult now, and we can handle life. We don't need to rely on terrible parents that aren't going to take care of us, on unreliable people anymore. We can rely on ourselves because we are reliable. We've always been reliable to ourselves, right? That's the sort of dialogue that I have to have with myself. And it's really, really cheesy and ineffective if you don't believe it. So that's why I was able to be told, CBT techniques for cognitive reframing for years, and it never really worked because I just didn't believe it. I didn't have the foundation of compassion and understanding for myself and for like the nature of pain and trauma in general. And I wouldn't have had compassion for the things in my shadow that would have come up, right? The first step to allowing this work to happen is having self-compassion. It really is, because if you can't do that, it's just going to be a disaster. You're just going to judge yourself. You're going to dig yourself deeper into your insecurities. Your subconscious is going to say, this isn't working. I'm going to just keep repressing all of this stuff until you figure it out. So step number 1 is compassion. And for me, part of understanding compassion and understanding like the responsibility to heal from my trauma was forgiving my parents. I had to really think about my relationship with my parents throughout childhood and, forgive them for failing me, because by most measures, they failed tremendously to raise me. I'm not going to go specifically, I've talked about my parents in some other videos, I believe, but I'm not going to go specifically into the things that they've done or the ways that they failed, or the things that they didn't do. Essentially, what I had to realize is that my parents had their own lives, they were their own people, and they were also in a lot of pain. They also did not have good life. I mean, my mom, absolutely miserable. Like, I used to hate her, now I just feel bad for her because she's had a life that is so, like, I can't imagine. There's an urgency when I look at my parents' lives and I think I don't want to be that way. I want to be so much happier than them because they're not happy people. They're in a lot of pain. And they've been in a lot of pain. And what I realized is that this pain was passed on to me because my mom, for example, couldn't handle her own emotional issues. She made it my problem. And I was only a child. I didn't know what was going on. I had an instinctual level of trust for her. And an instinctual level, I mean, they told me straight up because I was adopted that they chose me, right? That they chose to raise me. So being told that we're choosing you and then they completely fail the job, it's like, what do I do with that information? How am I supposed to feel about that? But the thing is, they didn't do that to me on purpose. They did choose me. They did want me. They did love me. They just couldn't. They didn't have the skills. They didn't have the knowledge. They didn't have the strength. And they had too much pain. People don't hurt each other intentionally most of the time. People don't hurt each other maliciously most of the time. They hurt each other on accident. And this is true for parents and children. And if I were to hold on to that grudge, it doesn't erase what they did. It doesn't erase the pain that I had to go through. It doesn't even erase their pain. But if I were to hold on to that grudge, I would just be holding on to the pain. There's only two options here. Either I continue to hold on to that and I wallow in it and I allow it to hurt others on accident. I allow it to leak out of me and hurt other people. Or I heal from it and get rid of it. And that is the meaning of breaking the cycle of generational trauma. That's my responsibility. It honestly feels like my purpose in life. And when I think about the ways I felt as a child that I'm remembering recently, I've kind of always been this way. My goal has always been to be happy and to make other people happy. I've always been somebody that has good humor, that has kindness and empathy, and those things were pushed out of me because of the pain that was passed on to me accidentally by my parents. So healing from that pain involves, not only is it a responsibility, it's something that I just feel like I have to do. It involves replacing the pain with something so much better and safer and healthier and more comfortable. It's the only right thing to do, in my opinion. Hi, this is me editing, and I just wanted to add here, in case you need like a visual metaphor for this, the metaphor that I came up with is, imagine you're like standing in a line of people, and the line of people is passing down this bomb that's ticking down, and it could explode at any moment. Nobody wants it to explode on them, so they just keep passing it on to the next person like a hot potato. And me, as the type of person I am, I just wouldn't feel right passing that bomb on to the next person. So I hold on to it, and I let it explode in my hands if it will, and I either diffuse it or I die trying. That's basically how I feel about my responsibility to heal from generational trauma, is that this bomb, this destructive thing has been passed down, and either I can diffuse it or I can die trying, but I refuse to pass it on to the next person who might get hurt by it. And it's very hard. It's very, very hard. There are lots of people, probably the majority of people that have the type of trauma that I have, never get to this point. I mean, I've met people in my life that are like older than me by a decade or more, and they still haven't healed from their traumas. They still are just bitter, miserable people that are in so much pain. They don't realize the responsibility to heal from that. When you're in pain for a really long time, it can feel like pain is just intrinsic to existence. It's just the default state. And pain is intrinsic to existence. It has to happen. It's necessary. But suffering is not necessary. And there can be harmony. There can be harmony between the pain and the joy. And there can be peace in that. And that's what it feels like to heal. So I've forgiven my parents. I've opened a dialogue with my subconscious. I can identify my emotions and feelings and their function and their purpose, and I can respect them and have compassion for them. I'm reparenting the inner child. through Jungian shadow work. And I've made a lot of progress recently. I feel that I have healed from the autistic burnout that I was experiencing for a very long time, pretty much the entirety of my 20s, which, when I think about it, is a really exhausting thing to realize, but I finally feel a lot better. I'm still gonna have my limitations. I still have, sensory sensitivities. I still need to wear sunglasses under fluorescent lights, and probably will never be able to work, say, like a retail job for 40 hours a week. But at this point, I feel like in a good environment, I could work a job. I'm not going to be looking for one just yet because the economy is in shambles and the job market's in shambles and the housing market's in shambles and this country is in shambles. But it's just not the right time, unfortunately. But I feel ready for it now. So the result of all of this is a general reduction in my neuroticism, right? Like, I have autism and ADHD, so I have a PTSD also causes a highly active nervous system. Like the autism, there's more connections in my brain, more synapses in my brain in certain areas. With ADHD, it's similar. And then with PTSD, that spreads to my whole nervous system, my sympathetic nervous system, and causes jitteriness, fidgetiness, anxiety, that kind of thing. And, certain things like breathing exercises and meditations and stuff like that didn't really work super effectively. And I believe it's just because my level of neuroticism was so high that, it was like a drop in the bucket, right? What I had to do was get into the foundations of the neuroticism and try to solve it from there rather than coming from the top down. And as soon as I solved some of the foundations and had a healthier foundation to stand on, the neuroticism just sort of naturally started to fade, and also those coping things like breathing exercises and whatnot started to be more effective. I'm calmer in general. I have less dreams about hiding from people. I have less nightmares. I wake up happy, whereas I used to wake up just filled with negative thoughts. I go to sleep easily, peacefully. I don't have insomnia anymore, which is, sometimes I say these things out loud for the first time and I'm like, wow, that's so amazing. I'm so proud of myself. I don't have insomnia anymore. I can sleep a full, who knows what it'd be like if I had a job, especially a job I didn't like. But in the current environment that I'm in, I don't have insomnia, something that I've had my entire life. And the compounding effects of all of these things just makes me feel so much healthier in general. I've started to learn skills. I've started to do like exposure therapy for myself for things that I had never done before. Like, for example, singing. I love to sing. I don't think I'm very good at it, but I love to do it. And I had this mental block where anytime I would sing and somebody would be in earshot, I would just freeze up and go paralyzed. Like, even if they were really nice and supportive, even if they were like, wow, that sounds great, that's amazing, I love it, keep going, I would just be like, nope, now I can't even speak because I'm so scared or whatever. I would just become paralyzed. And even if I really, really wanted to, even if I was really internally confident, just this mental block, right? So I started to do a little exposure therapy by singing in the car with the window open, and now I can do that. That mental block is gone. I'm not sure I'd be able to jump on stage and do a performance or anything, but I feel like I'm working on this for the first time ever. And if I can work on that, I can work on anything that's blocking me, as long as it's accommodating to my nervous system. And as my nervous system changes, it's going to be easier to accommodate as well. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I mean, I don't have much more to say about that. I've just sort of been thinking about this stuff recently and realizing, thinking back on the progress that I've made and realizing that I've done a really good job and feeling proud and peaceful in that. Um, I really feel like I'm doing things intentionally, like I'm fulfilling my purpose in life, and that things are, this is laying a foundation for future opportunities that are going to take me where I want to go. And I will keep my eyes open for those opportunities, whatever they might be. I'm going to continue growing the YouTube channel. I'm going to continue posting here. I appreciate all of you for subbing and for watching, by the way. What I've noticed is that as long as I keep posting, I don't really necessarily have to grab the algorithm or catch the algorithm to grow an audience. No matter what I post or where I post it, there's always a lot of people that enjoy it for whatever reason, so I must be doing something right. And as long as I keep doing that, it's going to keep growing. So I have a growth mindset, more than I ever have before. Not necessarily like hyper ambitious. I'm just going to see what happens. I'm peaceful in the life that I have now as well. I appreciate that I can take this time away from general society and away from like the economy and from the politics of it all, and just actually take the time to heal, because so many people have donated money to me to sustain my life during this time. I always wanted it to be a temporary thing, which is why I'm trying to, get the ad revenue on YouTube. But I still, I'm so grateful for that, because if I was still forced to have a job and to make my own income and to pay rent and to have a home to maintain and everything, and friendships and coworkers and all this stuff, that would be so much. It would be so overwhelming that I never would have been able to do the internal healing work that I've done. And I've seen this happen to other people where they could, but they can't because of their circumstances are just so overwhelming and stressful. And it's super unfortunate that the world we live in the country that I live in, they basically they do everything they can to keep us unhealthy, like mentally, emotionally, and physically. So I really appreciate the people that are able to maintain a job, because they're the ones that are giving me money and maintaining my life so that I can do this. And in return, I hope that you found this useful, that you found this insightful in some way, or maybe encouraging if you're sort of at this point in your journey as well. And if you're not, well, these are the signs that you should look for to know that you're healing. It's when you start getting childhood memories and you start approaching them with compassion and respect, when you start thinking about forgiving the people that hurt you, when you start thinking about forgiving your own negative coping mechanisms and thanking them for keeping you safe for all that time. That's when things, really, really start to get better. And I really hope I never, ever go back to that place that I was in, like mentally and emotionally. I really, really hope that never happens. And I don't think it will, as long as I keep taking care of myself. So, thank you so much for watching, and have a peaceful day.